Today we're going to talk about electrical wire, the different types of wire and their uses. The most common that you have in your house is 14-2 wire. It has a hot wire and a neutral wire. Hot is always black, neutral is always white. And this is what you use throughout your house. It's hooked up to your 15 amp breaker, and it looks after all your lights, receptacles, smoke alarms, and various lights throughout your whole house. The next wire you have is, again, it's a 14-2 wire, but it has a blue jacket on it. In certain municipalities, this is code that arc fault detectors have to be hooked up with a blue jacket wire. And an arc fault detector is hooked up to bedroom receptacles only. So all bedroom receptacles have to be hooked up to an arc fault detector, and in quite a few areas you have to use the blue wire. So when an inspector comes in, he sees the blue wire and he knows that it's done properly. The next wire you have is a 14-3. Again, all the same size wire, 14 gauge, except this has 3 wires. Again, we have a neutral and a hot wire being black, and we also have another hot wire, a red wire. This is used for 3-way switches. Right? You also have these 2 hot wires, and they're also used for split receptacles. And a split receptacle is where the brass tab is broken off here, and you have 1 hot wire on this receptacle and 1 hot wire on this receptacle, so each one has their own 15 amp breaker. The next wire you have is a 12 gauge wire. This is a 20 amp wire, and you use this where your 20 amps are required. Nowadays, you have to have a ground fault receptacle, 20 amp ground fault receptacle next to your kitchen sink. If you're within 1 meter of your kitchen sink, you have to have a ground fault receptacle, 20 amp. So this is where you would use the 12 gauge wire, yellow jacketed so it recognizes. You would also use this where else you require a 20 amp. They sort of recommend that dishwashers should be wired up with 20 amp. It's not code, just a recommendation. So this is where you would use your 12 gauge wire. Next you have 10-3. As the numbers get smaller, the larger the wire. So again, this has 2 hot wires, red and black, and a neutral. 10 gauge wire is used to wire up your electrical dryer that you have in your house. You have 240 volts here to look after your elements, and then you have 120 volts here to look after your lights and timers. The next one you have is 8-3. Again, same combination. You have your neutral wire, your 2 hot wires. Again, your hot wires look after your elements on your stove top and in your oven, and then you have 120 volts to look after your lights and timers that you have in your stove. The next one you have is a red jacketed wire. Red jacketed wire always means I'm 240 volts. It's got 2 hot wires in it. This is what is used for electric heat. Also, it should be used to wire up your electric water heaters, either 10 gauge or 12 gauge, depending on the wattage of your electric water heater. So whenever you see a red jacketed wire, it always means I'm 240 volts. Then you have armored cable, or BX cable as it's known. And this is used where it might be subject to mechanical damage. Where you'll always find this is running from a box by your furnace down to your furnace. And the most important thing is when you're selling this, always make sure that you sell or give the person these anti-shorts. When you get the wire in, it comes with a little bag of these anti-shorts. And those anti-shorts are to go between the metal casing and the wire to stop the metal casing from damaging the wire. When the inspector comes, he wants to see red there. If he doesn't see red there, then he will see red. Last but not least, you have what's called NMW. This is non-metallic wet underground. This is the wire you bury. It comes in 14 gauge, 12 gauge, 10 gauge. This is the wire that you have to use outside when you're going to bury electrical wire, because it's got special coatings on it to protect it from the elements out there. Here's an electrical chart that shows you all the different type of wires that I talked about and their various uses.